Whisper and the Serpent. You ever sit out late, just listening to the world breathe around you? That's when the membrane between what is and what isn't quite feels thinnest, you know? Things drift through, things that don't make sense by the light of day. And sometimes those things have names. One of those names was Eric. Now Eric, he looked like anyone. You'd pass him on the street, you wouldn't look twice. Mid-30s maybe. Always a bit too clean, even when he probably shouldn't have been. Hair cut short, nothing fancy. Wore shirts with collars mostly. He worked somewhere vague, something with numbers, I think. Had a quiet apartment, never much going on. Seemed perfectly ordinary. And that, I think, was the first thing that was truly wrong with him. Because Eric had a way with people he didn't like. Not a common way, mind you. Not yelling, not a punch in the nose. Nothing you could call the police about. Just a way. Take old Mr. Henderson. Crotchety old man, lived down the hall from Eric for years. Always complained about Eric's quiet footsteps, about the way Eric's mail slotted through the door slot too loudly, about the very air Eric breathed. A real pain, Henderson was. And one Tuesday, he decided to really let Eric have it. Cornered him by the mailboxes, red-faced, jabbing a finger. Called him all sorts of things, the usual neighborhood tirade. Eric just stood there. Not a flinch, not a word. Henderson was really wound up, spittle flying. And then, Eric shifted. Just a subtle lean forward, not aggressive, more like a person listening intently. And he started to speak. Now I've heard stories about this part, and they all say the same thing. It wasn't English. It wasn't anything recognized. It wasn't even a sound you could imitate. More like wind chimes made of glass shards, played backwards, deep in a cave. And it was soft. So soft you had to strain to hear it over Henderson's sputtering. But it wasn't just sound. Not really. It felt like something else, reaching out, cold and knowing. And while this sound, this impossible language, drifted from Eric's mouth, he would smile. Not a mean smile, not a taunting one, just a smile. The kind you give a small child when they've finally tied their shoes correctly. Pleasant, utterly without malice. And that was the second thing that was truly wrong. Henderson, he stopped mid-sentence. His mouth hung open. The color drained from his face, replaced by a sort of mottled gray. He just stared at Eric, his eyes wide and blank. Eric finished whatever those soft sounds were, and the smile faded, just a little. He gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. Then he walked past Henderson, calmly, and went into his apartment. Henderson stood there for a long moment. Then he slumped against the wall, sliding slowly to the floor. He wasn't unconscious. He was whimpering. A low, ragged sound, like an animal caught in a trap. He clutched his stomach. "It burns," he choked out, his voice thin. "God, it burns." By the time the neighbors got to him, he was sweating, shivering, doubled over. They called 911. Ambulance came, paramedics checked him over. Nothing. No signs of a heart attack, no stroke, no visible injury. But he was in agony. They rushed him to the ER. The doctors, they were baffled. Henderson was screaming now, a sustained guttural wail that tore through the quiet hospital halls. They ran every test they could think of. Blood work, perfectly normal. Blood pressure, temperature, everything was in the green. They palpated his abdomen, gently at first, then more firmly. He screamed louder, but there was no rigidity, no tenderness in any specific spot that would indicate, say, appendicitis or a ruptured ulcer. His vitals were stable, impossibly stable, for someone in such profound distress. Finally, someone ordered an X-ray, then a CT scan, just to be thorough, just to rule something out. The first X-ray came back, flat and gray. The radiologist squinted, called in another doctor, then another. There was a sort of hushed, tense murmur around the light board. Because on the film, Mr. Henderson's organs, they weren't quite right. His liver looked diminished, like a bite had been taken out of it, but smoothly, cleanly. His stomach, too, seemed smaller, compressed. His kidneys were indistinct, blurry, as if fading. They ran another, more detailed scan, and that's when they saw it, clear as day, or clear as the most horrifying, impossible day. Inside Mr. Henderson, where his organs should have been, or where parts of them had been, there was something else. A shape, long and coiled, slender. And as the technicians enhanced the image, zooming in, it became undeniable. It was a snake, an albino snake, pale and ghostly, its scales faintly discernible, its head resting near where Henderson's heart should have been, its body weaving through the emptiness it had created. And it was growing, expanding. You could see the faint outline of tiny, serrated teeth, almost transparent, yet unmistakably there. Eating, slowly, meticulously. The doctors, they couldn't even process it. They looked at the images, then at Henderson, still screaming on the gurney, his agony undiminished, his body otherwise pristine. There was no entry wound, no sign of anything piercing his skin, no infection, just an emptiness where organs had been, and a perfect, living thing consuming what remained. Mr. Henderson died on the table, not from any discernible injury or disease, but from the impossible internal feast. And that wasn't the first time, or the last. The landlord who tried to evict Eric over a dubious noise complaint. The woman in the grocery store who loudly accused Eric of cutting in line. The guy who clipped Eric's car in a parking lot and tried to drive off. All of them. They met Eric, heard the whispers, saw the smile. And then they ended up in the ER, their bodies dying from the inside out, consumed by something utterly alien and yet so undeniably there. The authorities, of course, they investigated. But what was there to investigate? Eric had never touched anyone. He'd never threatened anyone. There was no physical evidence, no forensics, just a string of completely unrelated, medically impossible deaths, all linked only by the fact that the deceased had, at some point, had a brief, unsettling encounter with a perfectly ordinary man named Eric. So you tell me, was it magic? Or was it just Eric? And maybe, just maybe, you'll think twice the next time you see someone who looks too ordinary, and you hear a sound you don't quite understand.